Good morning, everyone. Please welcome Clackamas County Board of Commissioners to the issues and updates on June 27, 2023. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, what's up?
Thank you, Chair Smith. Would you please convene as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County?
I will recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County.
This is request for consent agenda for the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. Is Housing Commissioner Ann Leenstra, are you online?
I'm aboard.
Good morning, Commissioner Leenstra. Item 1, approval of a resolution delegating authority to the Housing Authority Executive Director to negotiate and execute all final documents to accept affordable housing construction excise tax grant funds and loan said funds to the Hillside Park Building Housing Partner for approved pre-development activities for Phase 1 of the Hillside Park redevelopment project. Grant value is $1,700,000. Funding is through the City of Milwaukee. No county general funds are involved. Rod Cook and Devin Ellen from the Housing Authority, Health, Housing, Human Services. Go ahead.
Yes, I'll give you a little bit of background on this one. Milwaukee Municipal Code established a construction excise tax for residential or commercial improvements to fund innovative, affordable housing. We formally applied for the grant through a competitive process, and the city has agreed to provide cash to cover pre-development costs associated with the Hillside Park project. At the recipient's discretion, grant funds may be utilized to finance one or more loans to project partnerships and/or project developer, provided the applicable borrower uses the loan proceeds to cover or reimburse project cost. So we're requesting approval of Resolution 1978 to execute all documents necessary to accept the grant and also to loan the funds to the Hillside Park Building Housing Partner, LP, where they will be used towards approved pre-development activities for Phase 1 of the redevelopment of Hillside Park as intended by the grant award. HAC will be the first signer as the grantee, and the City of Milwaukee will sign the last as grantor. And with all development issues, it's very complex how this all rolls out, so I have Devin here if you need any experts background.
I have a few questions.
Oh.
Devin, do you want to say anything or wait for commissioners?
I think Rod did a pretty good job of summarizing. I just wanted to also let you know that we received just yesterday our Section 18 disposition approval from HUD for Phase 1.
For Phase 1 for redoing the entire thing.
Exactly.
Yes. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, this is a significant project. I'm really excited the fact that we're moving forward on it. And when I read this in the packet, I'm confused a little bit, so help me understand it. The way I read it is, they have a CET, construction excise tax, for all construction that takes place in the city. So what they're doing is they're going to use those funds to loan down, because it uses the word loan in here, right?
Yeah, there's kind of two pieces here. So the first piece is the city is going to grant the funds to the Housing Authority, and then the Housing Authority loans the funds to the tax credit partnership, the housing partnership. And that is because of tax rules related to the low-income housing tax credit, where grants cause issues with taxes incurred. They see that as a taxable event, whereas a loan, which is essentially, a zero interest loan to the partnership, that's acceptable under the low-income housing tax credit platform.
Okay, so let me reword it, see if I got it right then. So they're going to forego their CET funds, essentially.
They are using CET funds. These funds are CET funds, and they are granting it to the Housing Authority through a competitive process we applied.
Right, so they're not going to keep them. They're going to direct them to this project.
Correct.
To buy down the cost of the project.
Exactly. Yeah, the loan will be paid off at construction closing, and then those funds will be recontributed into the project.
Okay, that's great.
You're right, it is complicated.
It is.
So at what point does the loan ever is forgiven?
Yeah, so the loan is paid back at closing through project, funds that are raised, and then the Housing Authority will recontribute those funds to the project. So there is no The city is not expecting any funds to come back to them, and the Housing Authority will be paid back by the partnership and then recontribute those funds to the project.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, okay, good morning. I'm a little bit confused. Is the 1.7 million intended to attract a developer, or is the Hillside Park Building Housing Partner LP the developer?
It is a developer. We already have a developer on board, Related Northwest.
Okay.
And they are part of that partnership, which also includes the Housing Authority.
Got it, okay, thanks.
I want to thank the city of Milwaukee. Did their council have to approve this?
Yes, they did. Yep.
And I know that they do value projects like this. They do value housing and going through pretty much with the same thinking that we're having on this. I'm very thankful that they chose to use their CET funds for this county/federal government program structure down there. Any further questions? Commissioner Scholl?
How many units can we expect out of this project?
Phase 1 has 275, and that's what these funds are going to be used for, replacing 54 units that are going to be demolished through this disposition process. And then Phase 2 will have 225 more units, replacing 46 units.
Outstanding, thanks.
Just wanted to mention something. Yeah, so this is when we had our visit with our Senator Merkley, correct?
yeah.
And he was very pleased with this whole development, I remember.
Yeah,
So-
and they've really gone to bat to help us out with
Yeah.
HUD. And
Great.
Well, seeing no further questions and no objections, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Leenstra, for being here today.
You're welcome.
All right, next, Chair, would you please convene as the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District?
I will recess as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County and convene as the North Clackamas County Parks and Recreation District.
This is a request for consent agenda for North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. Item 1, approval of a personal services contract with McKenzie Engineering for planning and design to develop a neighborhood park at Jennings Lodge Elementary School property. Total value is $372,408. Funding through the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Capital Asset Funds. No county general funds are involved. Mike Bork, Director of NCPRD. Go ahead.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, directors. We spoke about this previously, and there was confusion on the dollar amount, so we brought it back to you. The total value of the contract is, as stated, the $372,408. The number we had brought you the previous time is we're only planning on doing tasks 1 through 3 of that contract to start, and that was that $166,000. So
Right.
this is the correct amount on the contract, and if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, Mr. Bork, is McKinsey Engineering a landscape architecture firm?
They are a planning, a landscape
have-
planning firm, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, I just don't want to digress too much, but I did attend your pollination event at Springfield. It was fantastic. So I'll
Yes.
talk about that later, but thanks for putting that together.
It was fantastic. I was there a little earlier.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
missed each other by minutes from what I understand, but yes, it
Probably.
was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I had my dogs dressed up as bees, but that's okay. You'll see those photos.
Thank you. Any further questions or objections? Seeing none, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, would you please convene as the Board of County Commissioners?
I will recess as the North Clackamas County Parks and Recreation District and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners.
You'll meet as the Board of County Commissioners for the remaining items today. Next is request for consent agenda for the regular county agenda. First is elected officials, the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. Item 1, approval to amend an agreement with Bridges to Change for transitional housing services. The amendment value is $665,896.68. For 6 months, the total agreement value is increased to $6,265,656.68 for 5 years and 6 months. Funding is through the state of Oregon and the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. No county general funds are involved. Captain Malcolm McDonald from the Sheriff's Office, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners and Chair Smith. This grant for Bridges to Change is for our transitional and reentry housing for targeting individuals releasing from prison. We worked with this partner for over 20 years, and also the housing for individuals with mental illness, either transitioning from prison or in the community that need stabilization. Mental health housing is where the IAA with H3S and HAC funds come in. They fund that portion of it. The rest is state community corrections grant and aid funding.
And this is budgeted for.
Yes.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks. Next, County Council. Item 1, approval of a settlement agreement with Black Hawk LLC to resolve litigation related to the lease of office space by the Office of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. The agreement value is $425,000. Funding is through transient lodging tax. No county general funds are involved. Sean Lilligren from County Council's office. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is litigation regarding an office space. It's been going on for a year. I've updated you many times at executive session. We reached a resolution. We are seeking your approval of the settlement agreement. Any questions?
Questions or comments? Commissioner West.
Just for the record, because, I wasn't here when this whole thing happened, but it seems to be quite a sticky wicket. Why are we having to do a settlement regarding our tourism and this specific property? What happened to bring us here today?
Sure. In general terms, the landlord, which is the plaintiff, Black Hawk LLC, was upset and went to the court to file a lawsuit because the county stopped paying payment on its lease obligations. We had a 10-year lease term beginning in 2018, and with staff reductions from COVID-19, the office space was no longer needed. So we proceeded with litigation. We tried to negotiate a settlement. Since we no longer need the office space, the landlord contended we should pay the full value of the 10-year term, and the county disputed that. And so that's in a general sense what happened.
Why doesn't why did our tourism department need that space, and then why does it not need it now?
COVID-19 caused layoffs, which was the initial reason for the removal from the office. County administration has looked into the issue about whether the space is needed and concluded that we do not need that space.
Okay.
There's no use for this property.
So this has been going on for 5 years?
We began, the lease term began in July of 2018. We vacated spring of 2020.
Okay.
And so, yes, in spring of 2020, the county has gone to great lengths to try and find a new subtenant to essentially make the landlord happy, if you will.
Yeah.
And we failed. The market for office space is not good, and the county went to great lengths to try and reach a mutually satisfaction agreement.
Okay.
And this is it. This amount here, this settlement agreement, is the parties reaching what I think is a good resolution.
Okay. And so a previous board got into this lease agreement, and so we're just trying to figure out the best way to exit it. And here we are today.
Previous tourism director, previous board, it was Chair Bernard in 2018, signed.
Who was the tourism director?
Danielle Cowan.
Daniel Cohen, okay. Okay.
I don't have any information about the details for their decision-making in 2018. What I took over was how to resolve the dispute in light of not needing the office space.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that background.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I guess I would summarize it to say that before we engaged with Black Hawk, there was quite an interesting series of events and circumstances that the leadership of the TDC at the time chose to go down this path. And in a sense, we were kind of a party to it, but there is some autonomy of the TDC. So it was a difficult decision, not necessarily for us, but circumstance. I won't say a decision. It was a circumstance. And I guess I'm glad that it's readily remedied, and I have faith that the new leadership at the TDC will probably be a little bit wiser here, now, and into the future, so.
Wait, can I ask a question? Is this transaction at all tied to the very public TDC issues with Chair Bernard back in that, around that time frame that the public was dealing with? Is any of this tied to that at all?
Like I said, I don't have any information on the formation of the contract or the lease. If Gary Schmidt would like to weigh in.
Yes.
Gary?
No, it is not.
Okay.
So quickly, at the time in 2018, the tourism staff felt they didn't have enough staff to grow in the current buildings here on campus. The Tourism Development Council agreed to have them search for an off-site location.
Okay.
The Board of County Commissioners had to approve the contract, so at the time, the board approved it. And then when the pandemic hit, the tourism transient lodging room tax ended. So there were no one going to hotels, the income stopped, the entire tourism department was laid off here at Clackamas County, and they had no need for office space because there was no staff left. And that
Okay.
started this whole process.
Oh, thank you.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yeah, I'd just like to state that the Board of Commissioners and the County Council and staff have worked every possible angle to resolve this in the most fair and inexpensive way. This $425 settlement, I agree, is the way to go. And we'll have this thing done, and it won't come back.
Thank you, Commissioners. I would agree, this is a very good settlement. Thank you for all your patience on dealing with this. See no objections.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Health, Housing, Human Services. Item 1, approval of a revenue intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Health Authority for financing of year 1 of biennial funding for public health services. The agreement value is $3,195,236.59 for 1 year. Funding is through the Oregon Health Authority. No county general funds are involved. Rod Cook, Director of Health, Housing, Human Services. Go ahead.
Yes, this is an agreement for 1 year, funding for fiscal year 2023. And then in 2024, the state will come back with additional funds for the same project. The funding provided by this agreement enables Public Health Division to continue providing core public health-related services to Clackamas County residents, such as HIV prevention services, tobacco prevention and education, women, infants, and children's program, and school-based health centers, among other things.
Questions or comments? See no objections.
Item 2, approval of an amendment increasing funding and duration of a personal services contract with Providence Willamette Falls Medical Foundation for outreach, engagement, and on-call emergency services. The amendment value is $864,848.38 for 4 years. Contract value is increased, total contract value increased to $1,044,848.38 for 5 years. Funding is through Supportive Housing Services funds. No county general funds are involved.
Yes, through this amendment, we are requesting the extending of the agreement through June 30, 2027, and increasing the consideration accordingly. Better Outcomes Through Bridges is a program that assists medically complex individuals struggling with issues such as homelessness, behavioral health, and/or chronic diseases by providing supportive services through mobile, in-person, and site-based outreach strategies. Last year, this program served over 200 households.
Thank you. The foundation as a recipient is an interesting vehicle. Can you explain that?
I'm
No, you
not sure, well, what I know about Providence and their foundation, I know the foundation tries to do all the nonprofit side of the work, and then there's a hospital that has a different tax code or tax ID that would probably be on the more medical side. So I believe, I'm not sure how this, they must have responded to our procurement as it relates to these issues, and it was the foundation that put out the application as opposed to the hospital side of it. But that's how I would speculate it had occurred, and that's how typically it would occur.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
I was just curious. The foundation does a lot. Does a lot in the community, and Providence Hospital at Willamette Falls here in Oregon City has built a whole new cancer center.
Yes, they did.
Yes, the Susan Danielson Cancer Center. And they also have plans to do more. They need to upgrade some of their facilities, and they're working on plans for that. Probably not with this amount of money, or with this program, but thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
All Right, item 3, approval of an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Human Services for Healthy Connections Oregon Pilot Partnership Program. The amendment value is $75,000. Total agreement value is increased to $302,300 for 15 months. Funding through the Oregon Department of Human Services. No county general funds are involved.
Yes, Healthy Connections Oregon established a multidisciplinary support network to serve families in Clackamas County by increasing access to culturally specific mental and emotional health, family and parental support, and substance abuse treatment and recovery programs. Through this amendment, this amendment adds funds to assist families with identified needs. So it's basically a flex fund. So and one of the examples I give here is that there was a child who needed a stroller for a non-ambulatory 7-year-old that can be used in public transit. So it's those type of things, like once they wrap around services, here's a special need, now they'll have funds to address it in the moment.
Great. Questions or comments? See no objections.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Transportation and Development. Item 1, approval of a contract with Colton Homes, doing business as Colton Construction, for the Johnson Creek Tributary Hideaway Court Culvert Replacement Project. Total value is $544,211. Funding is through the Damascus Road Fund. No county general funds are involved. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development. Go ahead.
Chair Smith, Commissioners, just to harken back, in January of 2021, heavy rains and strong winds caused trees to fall into a tributary of Johnson Creek. This resulted in the failure of a culvert supporting the road on Hideaway Court. As you can see, because in the staff report, we were able to secure a temporary bridge through our partners at Oregon Department of Transportation. But this project is essentially to replace, to put a permanent bridge in place, and also to allow a bridge that will provide fish passage for this particular creek. This project was advertised in accordance with ORS and LCRB rules on April 13th, 2023. Proposals were open on May 2nd, 2023. After review of the bid proposals, contracting with Colton Homes was determined to be in the best interest of the county based on the evaluations of the bids. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Tell me about the Damascus Road Fund.
Damascus Road funds are dollars with the that are specifically set aside for use within the area formerly known as Damascus, and we are programming those dollars to be used in that area accordingly.
Are we still collecting money since the city has disincorporated?
Yes, I believe it was a 10-year period from the date of the disincorporation, and we have those dollars set aside in a separate fund specifically for that area, and we have programmed those specifically for that geographic area.
Now, is that a city tax, a former city tax, or is that urban renewal?
No, it is. It was funds that were generally assigned to cities that counties do not receive, and basically they were set aside for the purposes of. It's like the distribution of gas tax and VRF and all those things at the state level, and so essentially those funds were dedicated to continue for a period of 10 years past the disincorporation.
And that's according to state law?
That's correct.
It's not anything that we do, okay? Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Yes, sure.
Mr. Johnson, the three-sided box culvert design bridge you're building for $544,000, that looks to me like a really good deal. Now, is that something you're doing in other places?
The type of bridge, and let's back up. It's not a huge road, so it's a smaller bridge and crossing, and that's what's relating to the cost you see here. The type of bridge that we use and the cost associated with it is mostly dictated by the width of that road and or the size of the culvert. We've got some culverts that are 60-inch in diameter that are ginormous that cost more, and there's different bridge designs that we put forward. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no objections, thank you.
Item 2, approval of a contract with Dirt and Aggregate Interchange for the Redland Road turn lanes at Ferguson and Bradley Improvement Project. Contract value is $2,142,905. Funding through Rural Surface Transportation Block Grant, Community Road Funds, and Clackamas River Water Contribution. No county general funds are involved.
Basically, we're looking to utilize Rural Service Transportation Block Grant and community-owned funds to construct improvements along Redland Road. The improvements include constructing designated turn lanes at the intersection with Ferguson and Bradley Roads. This turn lane is expected to improve safety, relieve congestion, and increase capacity on Redland Road. Essentially, you have an area where those left turn, if there's no lane there now, they're stopping in the through lane. This would add a left turn lane for those queues to take place. This project was advertised in accordance with ORS and LCRB rules on April 18th, 2023. Proposals were open on May 17th, 2023. There were 4 bidders. After review, contracting with dirt and aggregate interchange was determined to be the best interest of the county based on the evaluation of the bid process.
These block grant funds are federal. I'm asking, I don't know.
I think they're sub-recipient grants, but they are federal dollars that come down to the state for certain programs. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Any more questions? See no objections, thank you.
Item 3, approval of a contract with Eagle Elsner for the South Hillock Burn Road paving project. Total value is $655,000. Funding through the Oregon House Bill 2017 funds. No county general funds are involved.
This is a contract that's going to resurface approximately 1.6 miles of South Hillock Burn Road from Oregon Highway 211 to South Horner Road with asphalt. Basically, this Hillock Burn Road section is classified as a collector and has an average daily trip count of about 700 vehicles per day. The contract will include, but is not limited to, about 3,700 tons of asphalt, grinding of about 2,500 square yards of asphalt, completing guardrail modifications, completing pavement repairs, and other issues associated with the construction of those improvements. The project was advertised in accordance with ORS and LCRB rules on April 19, 2023. Bids were opened May 5, 2023. There were 5 bidders on this project. After review of the bids, Eagle Elsner was determined to be the lowest responsive bidder.
Questions or comments? A win for rural Clackamas County, yeehaw.
We're building a lot of rural projects. Yep.
Good for you, good for you. It's so needed, so needed. I'm shocked that you say that that road has 700 trips a day. My niece lives down that road, and I'll have to tell her.
Yeah.
Yep, see no objections.
Getting an improvement.
Yeah, see no objections.
Item 4, approval of a contract with Bent LLC for Woodcock Creek Grim Road Bridge Replacement Project. Contract value is $1,350,519. Funding through an Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board Restoration Grant and county road funds. No county general funds are involved.
So we inspect our bridges, and bridges have abutments. And essentially, one of the most significant issues that affect those abutments are scour from the river or waterway. They basically undermine or undercut those abutments, hence putting these bridges and overpasses in jeopardy. Essentially, and also this one happens to be a barrier to fish passage. We're looking to construct the construction of a modular bridge as the most appropriate and cost-effective alternative for the replacement. The final design has been approved and permitted by all required regulatory agencies. Clackamas County road funds will be responsible for the majority of the cost, a little over $1 million with the construction contract, but we are getting Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board grant revenues to the tune of about $348,000 to offset the additional cost. This project was advertised in accordance with ORS and LCRB rules on April 19, 2023. Proposals were publicly opened on May 10, 2023. After review of the bid proposals, contracting with Bent LLC was determined to be in the best interest of the county based on the evaluation of those bids.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections?
Actually, I do.
Yes, go ahead.
Question, is there, and maybe this is more of a question for Mike, but maybe you have the answer. I'm just wondering if there is a means of making it more scour-proof, these abutments. I mean, like boring down deeper or into the bedrock or whatnot. I mean, what can be done to alleviate that concern?
Well, you know, Mike is all bridges all time. I can ask him and get back to you. I mean, in regards to the design, if there's certain enhancements, things like that. You know, fundamentally, it's one of the natures of the river over time. As you know, you've been through floods here in the past, et cetera. Our waters rise and lower. Those rivers move. The ability to predict where those rivers are at. We try to give enough clearance on a lot of those waterways as one of the reasons or viable alternatives to reducing scour. But I can ask him and have him get more information back to you about other alternatives.
Yeah, I say that with my first business meeting in 2011 with the Lolo Pass bridge that collapsed because that was scoured out by that move. And then The other one was a pedestrian bridge at Gladstone that got scoured away as a result of some work, shoring that was put in place for the Lake Oswego pump station.
Yes.
And over the weekend in Yellowstone, that bridge collapsed, and
Yes.
they're citing scouring for that as well.
And those are significant water generating events.
Yep.
I mean, especially Lolo Pass. So, yep.
Seeing no objections.
Item 5, approval of a contract with Black Line, Inc. for the Type 2 slurry seal package, Happy Valley, Damascus, and the Overland Park areas. Total value is $667,104.51. Funding is through Oregon House Bill 2017 and Damascus Road Funds. No county general funds are involved.
Slurry seal sounds so interesting. We have a description in here too. If you're taking a look at that, so you have a better idea about exactly what it is. Essentially, this package will resurface approximately 5.1 miles of roads in the Damascus area, 3.7 miles of roads in the Happy Valley area, and 6.3 miles of roads in the Overland Park area with the Type 2 slurry seal. As you can see in here, slurry seal is basically an application over the top of the roadbed to preserve and reduce long-term maintenance necessity in future years. The project was advertised in accordance with ORS and LCRB rules on April 25th, 2023. Bids were opened May 16th, 2023. There were 4 bidders. After review of the bids, Black Line, Inc. was incorporated to be the lowest responsive bidder.
Commissioner West.
Thank you for the description. I appreciate it. So a slurry seal, sometimes you drive down a road and you'll see cracks, and it almost looks like they just filled the cracks with like a black tar type product. Or slurry seal kind of like, it looks like you re-asphalted the whole thing and it just kind of like.
It looked the latter.
Like a clear, like a gel coating that kind of goes over the road.
The latter.
Okay.
Yeah. Essentially, it's applied to the entirety of the surface. And does a broader, provides broader benefit to the roadway in its entirety.
Okay.
There are other applications of other materials for roads that have cracks in them.
Yeah.
You see that, like Stevens Road was a great example. They just did about 3 years ago, where they do that to reduce water penetration into the roads. But this is a more comprehensive application.
Okay, and is it less expensive than like re-asphalting the whole
Yes.
thing? So you're just kind of putting a shell layer over it, kind of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we're kind of putting a little protective cap over it versus having to go in. I mean, we go in there and we grind it. I mean, not only the road is comprised of various sections. You have the asphalt on the road itself, but you also have the substructure, and essentially this caps that entire thing.
Okay.
And provides a longer lifespan to that asset.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Seeing no objections.
Item 6, approval of an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services to extend the fire hardening grant program through December 31, 2023. The amendment value is 6 months. Grant value remains at $172,072. Funding through the Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services. No county general funds are involved.
This was hot off the press. So basically, with the legislature coming back, this deals with a fire hardening grant program, okay, that came down out of the destruction associated with the wildfires. And essentially were grants that were authorized back in March of 2022 as we went into the IGAs for these funds. And essentially, these are state funds that come through the Department of Transportation through our Building Services Program. And they're funds that people can apply for to do enhanced fire hardening to those facilities they're rebuilding, okay? Essentially, we've got, right now to date, we had about 13 applicants that have been approved for the use of these funds. Essentially, that's an award of about $53,000, give or take. There are 4 active applicants, and essentially this program was set to expire June of this year. And with this revision by the legislature, it allows us to extend the program out to December. So that's all this amendment is doing, is extending the timeline of the program. There is also talk about possibly extending it into future years, but that work is still underway. They're possibly looking to expand it for another year or 2, I've heard. But right now, this amendment gets us through at least till December, and then we'll keep coordinating with the state about other possible extensions.
It goes to show how long and arduous recovery from wildfires is. We have some communities and individuals that may never, ever recover. Does this require a wet signature? All right.
I don't believe so. I
No,
can
it
confirm
doesn't.
with you.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, very
Yep.
much. Questions? Yeah, Commissioner Scholl?
Mr. Johnson, all the people who lost buildings in 2020 in Clackamas County, they're familiar with this fire hardening program?
We have done a direct mailer to all of them, and the state has also done a direct mailer to all of them. Yep.
All right, thanks.
And if the extension goes through, we will be working to do an additional mailer to them to inform them of the extension process that's underway.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner West?
Is this not just individuals who maybe lost their homes? It says here stick-built manufactured homes. Basically, is it do they get reimbursed when they are rebuilding with certain or better products to be more resilient? Or does it also help the small businesses that maybe got like their farm equipment melted down? Or is it just directly like dwelling units or businesses also?
It's just, to the best of my knowledge, it is just structurally related to it. So when someone is rebuilding in these fire-prone areas,
Yeah.
they rebuild possibly with different materials that have more fire prevention component, like the roof type. Is it like
Okay.
going from like a cedar roof to like a tin roof or steel roof or things
Okay.
like that? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't believe it has any correlation to like equipment loss or anything like that. It was basically just to harden those structures that were in these areas that were prone to wildfires.
Okay. And is there like specific things within the bill, like this grant will pay for X, Y, and Z type of products, or
Well, if you look
better
at
access to well water to fight the fire? I don't know what you use, whatever they use, but
Well, you can see, there's topics in here for residential site construction and commercial structures as well. It's on Exhibit A it's like almost the last 2 pages of the packet. And you can see kind of grant amounts that are there
Gotcha,
and dollars
yeah.
that can be assigned for those purposes. And basically, those folks, just simply when they rebuild, we flag those projects in our permit system to ensure that we're providing them kind of an enhanced level of service and that they're aware of these grant programs.
oh, by the way, this helps you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if maybe they're not aware of the grant program, it's like, hey, you know what, you can come in and apply, we'll take a look at them, and if they qualify, then we'll authorize to transfer those monies.
Smart. Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Seeing no objections, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is the request for consent agenda. All of these items will be on this Thursday's business meeting agenda. Next, legislative update. There is not one this week. The legislative session is ended. Staff will provide a full comprehensive update for you in July on the outcomes of the session. Next, American Medical Response, or AMR, contract compliance and fines. There's a memo in your packet. This is a continuation of a discussion you had last week. Rod Cook and Philip Mason Joyner from Health, Housing, and Human Services will present. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have with me Philip Mason Joyner, Director of Public Health, to talk about the details. You've had this issue before you a couple of times. We're here today to look for a path forward on the AMR contracting process. Philip will give you the details and the options we have brought forward.
Yep. Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. Philip Mason Joyner, Public Health Director with Clackamas County. As stated in your memo last week at our policy session on ambulance services contracting and the ambulance service plan for the county, this issue was discussed. For the public's awareness, Clackamas County contracts with American Medical Response Northwest, AMR, and since July of 2022, AMR has failed to meet their contractual response time requirements multiple times. This has resulted in fines totaling $456,000. We are seeking board direction this morning, and we did our best to re-listen to this session, proposed a couple of different options for the board to consider, and we will, as county staff, carry out the wishes of the board. So, Chair Smith, would you like me to read the option? Would that be helpful, or would you like to take it from here?
Commissioners, have we all read the options?
Yes.
I think we've read the options, but thank you for offering.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would like to talk about this. Multnomah County has decided not to issue fines and penalties to this ambulance company. I believe Clark County did also. I will say this is rather old language in the contract. I'm not sure what the new language going forward is going to be, but the reason why the ambulance company is in this situation is they say because of a workforce shortage, of which they are trying very hard to remedy. Now, I look at the ambulance contract as a very important medical arm in our community. and they are charged with the emergencies of picking up people and getting them the best medical care in an emergency situation, and then transporting them to the hospital. All of the arms of the medical community during COVID and after COVID have experienced workforce issues. Of course, we don't have contracts with hospitals, but we don't really see our hospitals being punished because they had nursing shortages or they had beds piled up in the hallway. You know, we're not going to punish them for that. You know, we've had doctors' offices, private medical clinics that triage patients in their cars for taking COVID tests. I know that for a fact because my husband was one of those. We're not punishing them for not going about their usual way of doing business. Also, our sheriff's departments. We've had many, many complaints. I call the sheriff and they're not there, or they come many hours later to help remedy my situation where law enforcement is needed. And we're not punishing those individuals either. So why would we ever punish an ambulance company for trying to do the best they can? Last week, Randy Lauer and another gentleman from the ambulance company, AMR, came forward and explained their situation. And I did talk to him privately last week. And he did say, we are getting there. We are making headway on it. But you know what he also did say? As far as educating and certifying their paramedics and their EMTs, he says we get these people hired and we get them on board, and guess what happens? They go get another job with the fire departments, or they get another job here. And so they're always continually having to train. And so I am of the opinion that option 2 is the best. We cut the fine in half of the fine goes away, and we implement the rest of the fine for them to continue to train paramedics and EMTs. It's a long road to become a paramedic. It really is. I mean, the medical, as Commissioner West had talked to, the medical training on that, and then you have to do your practicum, and then you have to get your certifications. It's not an easy road. And I asked Randy Lauer, I said, are these new people coming into the system? I mean, are the people walking off the street saying, gee, I want to be a paramedic? And he says, not yet. There are people within the system already to see that this is an avenue. He hopes it's starting to flatten out. But I said, you also need a reserve. You say you need 3 paramedics or 2 MTs or the reverse, whatever that is, 5 to 8 people. But the minute you get them on, you're still going to have to keep training. Is that correct? He says, oh, yeah, because you need a reserve. Oh, yeah, because they can't account for retirements or somebody's going to quit or any other type. So I am of the opinion, Commissioners, that we are compassionate regarding the medical assistance that we can give to people. And I really think that's best for the citizens of Clackamas County. Frankly, I will have a hard time explaining to my dear aunt who lives out on Colton Road that we punished the ambulance service so we could get to her place 5 minutes earlier. That we gave them a fine is somehow going to make them get there faster. That does not equate in my brain unless, of course, you guys can explain it. I don't think you will or can. It's just in the contract. It's language in the contract that I believe that we need to look at for the future. Commissioner West, you were up first.
I agree with everything, almost everything you just said there, Chair. Thank you for those words. You know, when COVID was wonky, they said that they, were twiddling their thumbs a little bit as everybody kind of went on pause during COVID. I know in my own clinic, we also, our patients that would come in for needed cardiology treatment, they just wouldn't even come to the hospital because they were afraid to even just come to the hospital, so they would die of heart failure instead of COVID, or they would have, acute exasperations. I bet you the ambulance services kind of had this, across the board, the medical services, people just kind of stopped engaging with healthcare in a sense during that unique period of COVID. I am incredibly empathetic to the workforce issues that they brought forward. And it is, not an easy task to get through the prerequisites and the education to become a paramedic, and then to really get that on-the-job consistent training. You need to be really good under pressure, in kind of like an ICU type out in the field skill set. That's not easy skill to have, and it's not everybody can do it. However, he did tell me that they are only three paramedics short now. And that they are ramping up their EMT. Like, I don't know if they're understaffed anymore. You're always going to have a couple positions that need to be filled in any organization. Rod, I'm sure you can tell me, like, there's always this kind of wheel happening. And Philip, you also can, as employers here at the county. So I don't know if we're going to maybe see this be an ongoing problem. Let me ask you this, is this a one-off? Have we never seen this type of fine, or have we had a chronic and persistent problem with them not meeting the contract obligations?
I've been managing this work since 2014, and this is the first time we've seen it at this level.
Okay.
I will share, just in response to your comments about the current staffing levels. I think right now the focus is on the immediate issue, but there is, as we're seeing year by year, increasing call volume. So the need to have, our commitment is to, as county staff, to work on the performance improvement plan regardless of the direction the board sets today with AMR collaboratively. But part of it is to how to prepare for the future so we don't have this situation again, and at what levels, and how can we help support AMR as they need to continue to grow, as the needs in the community continue to grow over time.
Two questions. Chair brought up a question. Does this fine at all equate to better times? Because time is life in medicine. Like, time matters almost more than anything. Intervention to the crisis. Is $228,000 or $456,000, whatever the option is, is that going to make the difference here on whether or not a loved one or somebody in our community gets an ambulance to the door? I don't know. That might be a stretch to be able to show that. However, if we're very, what precedent does it set also to say, to other entities, if there was some type of, situation? I guess it's case by case, and it's up to the board to decide that, to say, well, you did that for one group, what about us? I guess that is an argument. I guess I don't know if this.
Commissioner West, I'm going to interject. You asked two questions. Were they rhetorical, or would you like staff to answer them?
They're rhetorical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could chime in on, do you guys believe that these fines are actually going to change response times?
Let me say this. We're a county that holds our contractors, our providers accountable. And we talk about performance outcomes all the time. So as it relates to having a goal or a target that we want any of our providers who are getting taxpayer dollars, we believe in that as a foundation. The reinvestment, option number 2, into the issue area that we're addressing is also brilliant, because it doesn't take money away from that organization. It actually says, we want you to prioritize some of those funds to deal with the issue at hand. So we really like option 2. Okay. But so that regard, now, will it increase times? We hope it keeps it at foremost of their minds that we're watching, and we're hoping that we get exemplary response times in Clackamas County. So that's what this is. It's a tool. Will it get us there? We'll have to see.
Thank you for that insight. And I'll say this. I think that this is a one-off for AMR. This is not the norm, right? And Philip, you talked to that. So I would be inclined to either 2 or 3. I will go along with this board and what we decide to do as a group, and then really being clear moving forward. There's another. If this happens again, there's another layer of account. We may not. That grace may not be there, right? Their accountability has to happen, but we had unique circumstances, and so. I appreciate the great contract work that was done. It sounds like it was one of the better processes that we've ever been through when dealing with this contract. But I would tend to be open to either option 2 or 3, but I will definitely take, in consideration what direction this board is going in.
Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, I know that we had a compressed time frame to discuss this last week though this was really not actually on the agenda. So I was struggling with juggling the topic of the changes and recommendations of what was on the work plan and then having this mingled in. So I didn't have focus on this. I had focus on the packet. So I didn't have a chance really to ask questions that I would have otherwise if this had been the focus. So I'm going to ask a couple, but I do want to say up front that I do know that I think AMR is not only a very reputable company, but also has a lot of resources. And while I think circumstances can be viewed as one-off, I see some of that as ongoing. My concern now a little bit is just the environment of losing a couple of the competing companies, due to economics, that the competitiveness of the region is somewhat, diminished. So I don't think there was anything deliberate or flagrant. So I think any punitive approach is probably not appropriate, knowing the circumstances. So I always been a person where, I like to incentivize rather than be punitive. So I haven't really made up my mind here as far as option 1, 2, or 3, but I'm just concerned. And the question I would have asked had their staff been here in the room, the AMR staff, I would have asked, is the pay scale the same for the Clackamas County contracted workers and the Washington County contracted workers and the Multnomah County contracted workers? Is there an internal incentive for people to work in Washington County as a paramedic? Or, is it more lucrative? I don't know. I don't know the answer. So I just see that while I believe that we ought to incentivize, what incentive can we place, here today, or maybe there's an option 4, I don't know. What incentive can we place that assures that I won't say the autonomy, but the workers who work for AMR within Clackamas County under this contract are incentivized to stay here, right? And AMR is incentivized to keep that staffed up if they have competing interest, right? Number one, which, if there was a shortage over here, let's say they're 5 short in Multnomah County and they're adequately, what keeps them, right? So I know that's an internal decision, right? And I can see some internal conflict, but again, I have faith in the company that they'll do their best. So we could say that this is a one-off, but I see the ongoing situation not going away anytime soon with trying to hire people, period, in whatever industry that may be. So I am struggling that none of these really provide an incentive to retain the Clackamas County workforce than the others. I won't repeat that point because I think the point's been made. So, but at the same token, I do look at option 1 as being maybe the closest to incentivizing. Though there's a punitive element, but if the dollars are directed towards some kind of a fund, then great. But not having that information as to the pay scales and how they remedy that, I have some uncertainty with which way to go.
Commissioner Schull?
Yes, last week, as you may recall, I was an advocate for option number 1. This morning, Chair Smith mentioned something that I think is important. She said that AMR is in competition, AMR, a private company, in competition with government agencies for the same manpower. And those government agencies are not subject to a fine if they're late in response. With that in mind, I look at option number 2, which is to waive the $228,000 fine that option 1 would ask for, and direct AMR to spend $228K on workforce recruitment. Now, AMR knows that if they continue to fail in their response times in this contract, they're subject to yet another fine, okay? So the other idea would be to waive the $228K part of the fine. But I'm saying now that we ought to just omit that completely. Ask them to pay $228K in workforce development, which is in their best interest and should help them avoid any fines in the future. Okay, so now I'm more attracted to option number 2.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl. A couple questions before I go to Commissioner West. We know that the margins are tight because of the inflation, and they're still trying to attract a workforce, as everybody in the medical community is, as this county is for even any department. We're trying to attract a workforce, and what would make it more advantageous to go to work for an ambulance company and become a paramedic than, let's say, to go to work in our county road department, right? You know, what is the attraction there? Well, because they have a heart of service, they want to help people, they want to engage in the medical community. We know it is very, very expensive for this training, even for a paramedic. It's hugely expensive. So in the new contract, so we accept the plan in September, but we accept the contract in December. In that new contract, is there an allowance for increased wages that AMR can pay? Or do we not mingle in that business?
Historically, we have not mingled in that. AMR sets the wages of their workforce as a private company, and the county does not engage in that space. My understanding is it is a union environment in the Northwest region. So Clark, Multnomah, now Washington, Clackamas, the pay is comparable. They are offering hiring bonuses, retention bonuses right now to try to address some of the concerns. And, you know, I'll just share anecdotally that Clackamas County, there are a lot of the workforce are residents of Clackamas County that work for Clackamas branch of AMR. And it's part of it also is, I think, the culture within the organization, the team and family environment that this company has created. That's part of the reasons why someone would choose to work in Clackamas County as opposed to other communities.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 commissioners. Commissioner West, you're next.
Yeah, I want to absolutely clarify something that probably was confusing. I do not support option 3. So I want to be very clear. I do not support option 3. I was already in my brain thinking of, I guess, an option 4 that doesn't exist, and there is the option to forgive it totally and realize that this is a one-off. This is not their history, that they have been good partners. We have done great negotiations that have been almost historic with the current contract. And I don't think that they are trying to find a way to not retain workforce. They've already made a huge amount of growth in the area which we're talking about. If they only have 3 open paramedic spots right now, they believe that they will are beginning to see a ramp up for EMT new staff within EMT. So I don't know. I think that we should be also talking about, like, is this fine actually going to bring the response times down, or is it just a fine that we're being creative with? Or in this one unique situation, do we realize that it was a very interesting and difficult time and do something gracious and just forgive the fine completely?
I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Not option 3.
Thank you for that point of clarification. We have 2 more commissioners, Commissioner Savas and then Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, one more point I want to make between option 1 and 2, which I don't think are really that much different, but here's what I like about a sentence in option 1 that is not contained in option 2. And it says that, I'll start with the last sentence, even though it's a long one. I'll start in the middle of the sentence where it basically says, spend an additional $228,000 in retained fine savings to support workforce and recruitment efforts and additional strategies identified in the performance improvement plan. Identical to the language in 2, but here's where it's different. It says, in addition to pre-planned efforts towards AMR's workforce development. So that in addition to, which I put emphasis on, it says not only are you going to spend the money to do what you're already doing, but you're going to do something in addition to that to strengthen it. And that's the part I like about option 1. Financially, it's the same. You can argue whether or not the word reduce AMR's fine or forgive the entire fine, whatnot is, that's not really relevant. It's essentially the same thing, but what I do like is in addition to, and that's encouraging to me.
Well, it is, but what I want to know, do we have to change the contract language going forward? And do we have to identify, Commissioner Savas, to your point, what those strategies are, or do they decide what those strategies are? Because I'm not an expert on ambulance delivery. I wouldn't know where to begin with this. We'd have to rely on our EMT council on this. Does this question make sense?
Yes, and there's two questions here. So your question about moving forward with the new contract, should the board choose to approve it in December, it would have a new modified version for how fines are approached. The response time requirements are lessened in the suburban area, which is a big area around the fines where they're not meeting the current response time. So that'll make a difference moving forward, reducing those or increasing the time by 2 minutes from 10 minutes to 12 in those geographies. The other piece is if they are meeting those new clinical performance metrics that we'll be evaluating, if they meet those, then they're incentivized by receiving essentially a reduction. If they do incur any penalties, they will, or fees, that would be reduced because they're meeting the clinical quality, which really when we look at the quality of healthcare that's provided and the outcome of the response, that's what really matters in terms of patient care for our residents. So the fines with those enhancements should be improved moving forward. And then Chair, your other question?
I don't want to have to identify for AMR what these strategies are. Savings to support workforce. I don't want to have to define for them in the contract either what the recruitment efforts will look like or any additional strategies, because I don't think that's what this contract is designed to do. Is that correct?
Yes, and my interpretation is that county staff would work collaboratively we're prepared to sit down with AMR once we have board direction to develop a performance improvement plan, essentially a work plan with a budget, with timelines and specific activities that AMR will carry out. It could be immediate, it could be several months, it could be over the next year.
Well, they're working on it hard now.
And they're working, I think what this is intended to show is they're already doing things.
Right.
And this is to use the $228,000 that AMR will keep to further enhance these efforts.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, just a couple of questions, and I'm thinking about making a motion here. So you are telling us that in the Tri-County area, that salaries are comparable. And one of the things I've heard is that oftentimes they will move from one place to another. For example, if there was a change to a different ambulance carrier here, all right, sometimes the folks from the other carrier will transfer into that. That's one of the things I found out a long time ago when we were first working with ambulance contracts. And then what I'm hearing from you is really to Commissioner Savas's point as well, that you are already doing performance improvement plans with them as part of the accountability piece that we have in order to offer a contract to a private entity. I mean, that's part of the collaboration here. You're not running the private company, but we have built-in accountability conversations as we track all of this. So I'm prepared to make a motion to adopt option 2. If there's a second, now I know Commissioner Savas, maybe it's a little too early for you, but I'll let the chair decide who speaks.
Yeah.
So we have a motion on the table.
Motion
Do we
on
have
the
a
table,
second?
And I will second it.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Schrader has moved. We adopt option 2. Forgive the entire $456,000 and direct half of it to 228 to support workforce and recruitment efforts and additional strategies identified in the performance improvement plan. Discussion, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah,
And Commissioner Scholl second that.
Yeah, well, the motion has been made, but what I wanted to just say up front was, again, kind of just show my preference for option one, but I would probably wanted to add a word that would say at the very, very end, it would end with pre-planned efforts towards AMR's workforce development in Clackamas County, so that it's specific to the county. But if that's not even on the table, then it's moot.
Do you want to amend the motion?
Well, the motion is completely different. So
The maker needs to amend the motion, if I'm understanding Commissioner Savas, at the very end, in the performance plan in Clackamas County is what you would like to see
Well,
added.
that could be applied to either one or two.
Well, I think we have motion 2 on the table. Martha, do you accept that?
Yes, I would accept an amendment.
The maker of the motion accepts in Clackamas
And
County.
I would second that change.
Okay, and he will second that change. But we will have, Commissioners, I believe, another bite at this apple when the contract language is finally written, and it'll come back to us, correct?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Savas, I think let's let the folks go do their work in drafting this language, and we can come back and take a look at it and make an adjustment at that time if we feel compelled to do that. I would be willing to look at the contract language to see if it fits what we are thinking here. Is that all right? Commissioner Scholl.
I feel that option 2 has no punitive element to it because AMR is already compelled in their own best interest to spend about that kind of money in workforce training. Thank you.
I'm not sure who was next. Does it matter?
I'm done.
Commissioner West?
How do we verify that they have spent exactly $228,000 as directed by this?
We'll require AMR to provide for the budget, and then they'll need to provide us with financial information so we can monitor that it has in fact been spent within the timelines as identified in the improvement plan.
Since we're in discussion and we're talking about this specific motion, I don't know if I'm totally there yet on this with the rest of my commissioners, and I'm not mad at option 2, I guess. I'm not, I see that. I would lean towards an option not on here that I think that they've already made immense progress as they presented to us on this. And so this being such a one-off situation that I would prefer us just to say, we're going to continue to monitor this. We're going to just forgive this going forward this time. As we look at that is where I'm kind of leaning. But we have a motion for option 2. I have not even decided right now how I'm going to vote as this moves forward, to be honest with you. It's swirling in my brain a little bit. But I just wanted to at least communicate that with you guys during the discussion period.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, as I think about this, I'll just say it a little bit differently, maybe, and it could get me across the finish line, if that's any help. And that would be just to take that last part of option 1, that piece I spoke to before, where it begins with "in addition to" pre-planned efforts towards AMR's workforce development, and then with the addition of in Clackamas County, you just bring that down into option 2. And just add that to option 2. So it would read in option 2, forgive the entire $456,000 fine and require AMR to direct $228,000 of their retained fines savings to support workforce and recruitment efforts and additional strategies identified in the performance improvement plan, in addition to pre-planned efforts towards AMR's workforce development in Clackamas County.
We've already have the word support workforce in there, so you want workforce development and.
Well, it would add the "in addition to pre-planned efforts towards AMR's workforce development." It would add that to option 2.
Okay, well.
If you would accept that amendment, that would be helpful.
I'm looking at my
Appreciate it.
colleagues.
I don't care.
I don't care.
I don't care because we're going to have another bite at the apple come December. I'm going to read that contract language carefully. Carefully, I can assure you. I've been knee-deep in this contract.
So I'm okay with the amendment, if that
I
is-
don't see Commissioner Savas's additional words changing the motion significantly. Therefore, I would second that change.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Tony and Gary, Is the motion clear, or is it totally muddy?
Clear to me, Tony, clear to you?
Completely clear, Madam Chair.
Whoa, you're a good man, Tony.
Okay. I just will say before we take a vote on this, this is not punitive. This is not punitive. I am not interested in being punitive to any of our medical providers. Just what we have been through in this county with the firestorms, with the ice storms, with the ongoing COVID situation. We are barely recovered. We are barely recovered. We must do everything we can to keep all of our medical systems going forward and with the workforce and the money they need. And when we adopt option two, it also has an accountability piece in it. Rod, you said all of our contracts in Clackamas County have an accountability piece in there. Okay, we understand that. I think the public would like to see accountability as well. I also think the public does not want to see the emergency services punished for something that was really out of their control. So thank you very much, commissioners, for this. Any further discussion before I call for a poll? Tony, please go ahead.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
No.
Commissioner Schill.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. Motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much for coming forward. Gary, what's next?
Okay, 3 of you are leaving for a lunch event. What time are you leaving today, commissioners?
I'm supposed to be there in 3 minutes. I'm speaking.
Okay, are the rest of you leaving? What time, please?
I can forego I'm supposed to go.
Okay,
This next subject is probably going to be as long as the last subject we had.
Yep, okay, so I'm going to move ahead 2 items because those 2 have to be done today, and then we'll come back to the supportive housing. So I'm jumping ahead. Clackamas County Business Alliance. Commissioners, they are inviting you to a board forum with you all in July to talk about economic development in Clackamas County. It will be a live in-person event at the Museum of the Oregon Territory on a date that we'll make sure it works for you. Are you willing to do this event?
Well, it's all of us?
All 5 of you.
That'd be interesting.
Sure. I'm going to NACO on the 20th, so.
We'll make sure it's a date you're all here.
Yeah, it's a date we're all here.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm here, what the schedule is.
Okay, we'll coordinate your schedules to make sure it works, but it'll be a later July event, all 5 of you in person to talk about economic development items.
Okay.
Do you all agree?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, their topic coming up is one I really want to be a part of, but so I can choose because it's not something that we can push forward either. Like, these are important topics. I need advice on, like, do you know where I'm supposed to be? I'm supposed to be speaking at the luncheon but it's just me introducing myself as a new elected. That's important, but this is my work. So I'm just kind of asking for some direction about, like, how we navigate this.
So most events actually start at noon, so I'd like staff who are listening confirm, does this event start at noon or or 11:30?
I got a text saying from staff that I should be there at 11:15.
So that sounds like the event starts at 11:30 where you're speaking.
Yeah, yes, that is my understanding.
So it's an advertised event that I think you should go to, Commissioner West. People are expecting you to be there, so.
Okay.
Yes, I think you heard concurrence that we would all attend the OCBA for the Economic Development
Got it.
Forum.
Thank you. And next one also I need to do today, the County Blue Ribbon Committee on Housing Addiction Recovery. So I need 2 board liaisons, but somehow we've identified 3. So I want to confirm. Up to this point is Commissioner West, Commissioner Savas, and Commissioner Schrader. You had 2 different discussions, and you each identified 3 of you. So which 2 of you would be the liaisons to help staff plan the event?
I am fine with my colleagues taking that lead.
Great. Okay.
So Commissioner Schrader, Commissioner West.
Yep.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on. Metro Supportive Housing Services Measure Revenue Forecast. Who's doing this? Come on up and do it quickly, please. Adam Brown and Vahid Brown, Health, Housing, Human Services. There's a memo in your packet. Just lead with the change, and then we'll go from there, please.
Got it. Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. Adam Brown, Deputy Director, Health, Housing, and Human Services. So I'll sort of cut to the chase. You know, we were here 2 weeks ago with a spend down plan, priorities for one-time and limited term investments. that spend down plan estimated our carryover balance at $58.6 million for next fiscal year. That estimate was based on the most recent revenue forecast by Metro, which was provided to us in advance of our annual budgeting process. Yesterday, Metro staff gave a tax collection and disbursement update to the Supportive Housing Services Oversight Committee. And during that update, they informed the Oversight Committee that collections for this year have exceeded the revenue forecast, and that regional collections are now forecasted to be $325 million, up from the initial forecast of $225 million, with collections through May of $309 million. The increase is primarily due to spillover from tax year 2021, which is payments for tax year 2021 that we've received this year, as well as widespread income growth coming out of the pandemic. So during our policy session, we mentioned to you that given the pace of current collections and based on preliminary information from Metro, we thought that this might happen. And so the revised forecast will increase our anticipated carryover balance by $21.3 million, taking it from 58.6 to just under 80 million. And we haven't proposed any decision points for you today about priorities for that 21.3 million, but we were intentional about our framing during our spend down plan discussion that additional revenue would allow the board to go farther on some of its priorities. In the capital needs category, for example, we set out a long list of needs, including resource navigation, crisis stabilization, behavioral health and addictions recovery, recovery-oriented transitional housing, and partnership opportunities with the cities. We know these things are priorities for you, and we propose 16.8 million in that category. That'll go a long way, but we also know that capital projects are very expensive. So the additional funding will allow us to go further, for example, in that category, but our recommendation is that we take some time and be very intentional about how best to fold these funds into our spend down plan. That's the.
So this was based on the year 2021 spillover. Just yes or no? You said 21.
Yeah, there's spillover, but it's also due to increased collections in the current fiscal year.
Yes, okay, and our county is growing, and we have people moving in to this area where the collections happened, and other areas too. So would we expect that there to be more carryover for year collected 2022 and 2023, or is that already in what the projections are going to be?
That's the forecast update for collections for the current fiscal year. So it's factoring that in, what's actually coming in now
Okay, so.
for 2022, calendar year 2022 payments.
So the 58 million that this board approved is a very good plan. It is fluid. We can, change and go back and forth here. It's going to take a year for that $58 million to get out the door, realize programs put together. And we're competing with the workforce issue in this area as well. This board has so much wanted to have recovery be at the forefront of everything, and I think I can say that without asking or stepping on toes, okay? But that requires an intense workforce that we're competing for around the state and in the Northwest for. Also, finding locations, because we're confined to the Metro's boundary, which is also the urban growth boundary, which is very difficult to find available housing, places to buy, to site clinics or housing recovery centers or stabilization centers, whatever word we want to use for that, and the words are various and ongoing. I think that we are in a situation that I really have never seen before in my elected life or as an observer of that, in that we have a $21 million overpayment of taxes from our citizens. I think we should give the $21 million back to the taxpayers, because we do admit we're going to have difficulty getting this out the door of the $58 million that we already are spending. I think our taxpayers have been extremely generous. It goes back to the businesses that we're trying to support in our economic efforts. And those businesses could use the money as well. Now, I don't know what Metro is going to do. I don't know what the other counties are going to do. But that's just my thoughts. This is an over-collection of taxes in a possible recession in higher interest rates, and all businesses are looking at the interest rates, and they are hanging on, and they're hanging on. Just my thoughts. Who was up first?
Chair, I'll just jump in. I really think we ought to be very thoughtful and intentional. There is an anomaly here that I've asked about that they have not been able to provide, so to add a layer maybe of confusion or understanding, you pick. And that is that, as we all probably know, I think, that some people had no idea that they owed the tax because it was not noticed. And so there are prior back collections that are occurring that are being rolled into this amount. Software companies, taxing agencies were aware of that. Not all people have their taxes prepared, even though they might have their business in Clackamas County or in the metro region, but they have their taxes prepared either out of state or other areas. So they were completely oblivious to this. So part of this surplus we're seeing, we don't know exactly, because I've asked the question, and I don't know, not sure when we're going to get any real answer. Part of this is really those back collections. So it's going to take some time to settle out. I just suggest we be nimble and be thoughtful and consider all options, but I think we're still another year away from stabilization, understanding what the real flow is going to be, because this really could be an anomaly of those back collections. So essentially, you almost need to take the total amount divided by the months it's been in place and get a better idea of what that number might be, and I'm not sure they've done that.
So Commissioner, you're correct. A lot of this is back collections, and we can get that data for you. I know that Metro does have access to the data, and I'm happy to inquire with them to get a breakdown of what portion of this is prior year collections, what's current year. We can work on that.
Yep. But I just say that right now we consider all options, but not take any action as of yet. And if they are truly over collecting, I think probably the smartest way to deal with this is to maybe look at reducing the amount of the percentage rate going forward. But we still have a situation where we want to pay more people for the workforce shortage. And I think that needs to be calculated into what that means mathematically as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces of this, and I think being nimble is smarter than it is to maybe, jump to the gun, so to speak.
Yeah, I want to make one more comment about the collections too. We have reason to believe there are some anomalies based on the current economic conditions. So for example, Multnomah County has had a business income tax for years. The year-over-year increase in BIT collections from Multnomah County was the highest year-over-year change since 2003. And then additionally, at the state level, on the personal income tax side, there was almost a 100% increase in year-over-year revenue from capital gains. That's remarkable, 100% year-over-year increase. And capital gains, given that this is an income tax on high-income earners and businesses, that could account for up to 20% of the total revenue that we collect here. So that could, that signals that this might be an anomaly. And so far this year, it looks like capital gains at the state level is down about 50%. So I think, we've known all along that this is going to be a volatile revenue source and that we're going to need years of revenue collections data before we get a good sense of what that kind of baseline amount is. But the amplitude on the collections is going to be high. And our job is to kind of hold firm, try to find that baseline amount and then plan around it.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't base everything on the spikes.
Yeah.
The amplitude.
I'm not sure who is next. Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, thank you. The idea to give money back to the taxpayers, I love that idea. But the problem is, this is supportive housing services money coming out of Metro to the counties. If we give it back, it's going to go to Metro for redistribution to other counties, and it won't help us. On the $21.3 million additional that you mentioned this morning, your idea to put 16.8 into capital investment, out of the 5 categories in your plan, 16.8 back into capital investment, and that leaves $4.5 million left over. I would encourage us to look at taking the 4.5 and putting it proportionally into the other 4 categories. Because you need to have this resolved relatively soon, do you not, this plan?
So, Commissioner, just for clarification, that 16.8 million was the amount that we originally proposed to you of the 58.6. So we haven't proposed anything with that 21.3. What I was just giving you an example that it would allow us to potentially go further in that other category, but it wasn't to kind of predetermine that process.
Okay, so you don't need a decision today
We're not
exactly
gonna
where that
make a
money goes?
decision
Okay,
today.
No, this
good.
is informational only.
Gotcha.
It's late breaking. We just wanted to
Yeah.
get you the update as quickly
This
as we
is
could.
just an opportunity for-
Understood, yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
get us our ideas out there. Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I actually agree with what Commissioner Savas said about this, because we're in a wait-and-see mode, because we knew from the beginning that this was going to be a volatile revenue source, and we also knew that based on how the tax code worked, that it would take a while to ramp up to get the dollars, and now we're kind of like in super mode. And I do know that we were criticized by a lot of the advocates because we were ramping up slowly because we wanted to get a sense of how volatile, or not volatile, this revenue stream was. I think caution is a better way to go with this. I'm not convinced that there'll be another overcollection, but I do have a question. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this. Is this something that like the Portland Business Alliance is pushing for and some of the other business folks in Portland to try and claw back money from, does anybody know that?
Claw back money.
Claw back money from Metro for this, from this piece that was passed. That's what I am hearing, and I don't know how true it is. I haven't talked to anybody in the business community that's.
Gary, can you address that?
Yes, that's true.
But I don't understand what we mean by the clawback.
Well, they want the money returned.
To the people.
To the businesses, yes.
Oh, wow.
That's
Okay.
the generation of this, is that they're feeling that since there's an overcollection in their minds, that they're saying, we're suffering right now, we need that money back. And I have not talked to anyone about that.
I haven't either.
I haven't, and frankly, I think because of the volatility of this, we need to just wait and see. I'm not willing to support that quite. I'm just wondering what there are just external dynamics that we all need to be aware of with
This
this.
is information only, Commissioners. We're not here to make a decision.
Right.
But I think we have some ideas out there. We could also ask Metro to put a one-year pause on it until it stabilizes and we're able to figure out exactly what our tax collections are going to be. Multnomah County Commission will be discussing this in July. They haven't decided what to do either. Washington County has taken, I think, a little bit different tact on it. But they do their budgets differently. For instance, Washington County will budget on projections. We don't do that. We budget on actuals.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe our budget is very secure and very safe. Yes, and so we're not going to make a decision today. Thank you for your input on this, and we appreciate it. And we'll bring it back. We'll put it on the agenda when we get more information or when commissioners want to consider. We are not under a timeline, are we correct?
No, that's right. And the takeaway from the policy session was to come back to you anyways with
Let us
regard to
know
like
we
the
have
capital
this.
investments and make some recommendations about what to do there. So yeah, we have time to make a very intentional
Well, I
decision.
think there's some juggling and some balls in the air. Let's wait and take a look at what the conversations to the north of us are. We are not in a hurry, but I just am really sensitive to the pressure being put on our tax-paying businesses and our tax-paying citizens in this county. I'm not exactly sure if what you said was correct. It would go back to Metro. I do believe the tax could go back to the citizens in Clackamas County.
Well, I would support that 100%, but we need to coordinate that
Oh, yeah.
metro region-wide.
You betcha. Commissioners, I think you all need to go to a luncheon.
Chair, I have just one quick update. I'll try to do it under a minute.
Yes.
Yes, so the update is that as a result of some information that was released by ODOT yesterday, in writing, there's a suggestion or really a plan in place to cancel the lanes on I-205 and the Tualatin Bridge repairs, ceasing the project indefinitely. The word indefinitely was used in there. I suggest that we be very thoughtful about this. There's a meeting tomorrow morning. There's another with the OTC. There'll be more materials presented to the governor with their timeline of July 1st and also December 31st. I suggest that we take this issue up with our legal team in executive session in sometime in the near future of July.
Commissioner Savas, I'm in full agreement with you on that. This is a contractual issue, and that we have discussed this before in executive session. Gary, let's get together with Stephen Magcor and see when we can tee that up and have a good discussion. It won't be next week, we're off.
Right.
Would the week after be?
If we can assemble that team by then, I'll just look at staff and we'll circle back. So whenever
Dan,
that
can
works
this wait
out.
till July 11th, Dan? Thumbs up or down?
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's give some input to see. Paul, reach out to transportation staff, and we'll get that teed up as soon as is practical to do. Thank you.
Right.
All righty. See no further business?
That's it, yep.
We are adjourned.